"Don't look at me," she whispered, bruised and barefoot. Until the rancher laid down his gun, the night was cold, and the wind cut across the empty fields like sharp little knives. Emily ran, her bare feet scraping against the rough ground, every stone and twig digging into her skin. She didn't care. Pain was nothing compared to the fear that chased her like a shadow she couldn't escape. Her arms were scratched and bruised, her clothes torn in places, and her hair stuck to her face with sweat and dirt. She whispered to herself, almost as if saying it out loud could make it real, "Don't look at me! Don't look at me!" She stumbled over a fallen branch, catching herself just in time before hitting the ground face first. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. Every sound in the dark made her jump, the rustle of leaves, the distant cry of an owl, the snap of a twig. She knew someone was out there, someone who wanted to find her, and she couldn't stop running. Not now. Not ever! Emily's mind raced as fast as her legs. She had been trapped before, in a place where nobody would hear her scream, where no one cared if she was hurt. She had learned long ago that looking for help wasn't safe. People often made things worse, or they looked at her with pity that felt worse than cruelty. "Don't look at me!" she whispered again. She felt like hiding inside herself, trying to disappear. The night stretched on, and the forest around her seemed endless. Trees loomed like silent watchers, their branches scratching the sky. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to keep moving. Stopping meant danger. She had learned that lesson too many times. Her feet were bleeding now, tiny drops of red mixing with the dust and mud of the path she ran through. She barely felt it. Adrenaline pushed the pain away. A sudden noise made her freeze. A branch snapped somewhere to her left. Her breath caught in her throat. She pressed herself against a tree trunk, trying to make herself small, invisible. For a long moment, there was nothing but the sound of her own heart hammering in her chest. Then the wind moved again, carrying the smell of smoke. She frowned. That wasn't normal. Someone had been here. Or was still here. Emily kept running, choosing her steps carefully despite the growing pain in her feet. Her mind wandered briefly to memories she tried to forget, the place she had escaped from, the shouting, the fear, the feeling of being trapped with no way out. She shivered, but not from the cold. She had spent her whole life learning how to survive, how to keep moving even when every part of her wanted to collapse. She had learned to trust no one and to depend only on herself. And now, she hoped that skill would be enough. Hours seemed to pass. Her legs burned, her lungs screamed for air, but she couldn't stop. Ahead, she saw a faint glow through the trees. A house? A farm? Her hope flickered. Maybe she could find someone who wouldn't hurt her, someone who would see her as human and not as a problem. She didn't dare dream too much. Disappointment was a familiar friend. As she got closer, the glow became more distinct. Warm light spilled from a window, soft and welcoming in a way she hadn't felt in years. She hesitated for a moment, thinking about how people often saw someone like her. Would they call the police? Would they judge her? Would they turn her away? Her chest tightened, but the fear outside was stronger than the fear inside. She took a deep breath and ran the last few steps toward the fence surrounding the property. The fence was tall, made of old wooden posts and wire. She paused, looking around quickly. No one seemed to be watching. She grabbed the top of the fence, using all her strength to pull herself up. Her fingers burned as the wood scraped her skin. A shout echoed in the distance, and she froze, her body tense. Whoever was after her was still there, still close. She didn't have time to be careful. She swung her leg over and dropped to the ground on the other side, the pain in her feet momentarily forgotten. She looked back once. The dark forest swallowed the path she had come from. For a brief second, she allowed herself to imagine she might be free. But the fear didn't leave. It clung to her like a second skin, reminding her that safety was fragile and fleeting. Emily moved quickly toward the light, careful not to stumble again. Her feet left tracks in the soft dirt, but she didn't care. She just needed to keep moving. The house was small, made of wood and stone, with smoke curling from a chimney. It looked quiet and peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos of her life. She approached cautiously, peeking through a window. Inside, she saw a man moving about. He was tall, wearing rugged clothes, and he looked like someone who worked with his hands. He noticed her at the window and froze for a moment, then reached for something. Her heart sank. A gun! Emily's instinct screamed at her to run, to disappear again, but her body was too tired. She backed away slowly, pressing herself against the side of the house. "Don't look at me!" she whispered again. She kept her head down, hoping he would not see the bruises, the dirt, the fear. She had learned to hide herself, to hide her story, because showing it often brought more danger. For what felt like an eternity, the man watched her. His hand rested on the gun, but he didn't raise it. There was something in his eyes that gave her a tiny spark of hope. Not pity, not judgment, but curiosity, maybe even concern. Emily didn't trust it yet. She had been wrong before. People who seemed kind could hurt you faster than anyone else. Her body trembled, exhaustion finally catching up to her. She sank to the ground behind a bush, hugging her knees. The tears came without warning. She cried for the fear she had felt, the pain she had endured, and the loneliness that had never left her. But even as she cried, she stayed alert, listening to every sound in the night. Every rustle could be the danger she ran from. Every shadow could be her enemy. Emily's mind wandered to the future, though she tried to push the thoughts away. Could she survive another night? Another day! What if she found help, and it wasn't safe? She didn't have answers, only instincts and fear. But she also had a stubborn spark of hope that refused to die, even when her body screamed for rest. That hope whispered that maybe, just maybe, she could find someone who would not hurt her. As the first hints of dawn broke over the horizon, the forest began to look less terrifying. The shadows faded, and the light revealed the gentle rolling hills around the house. Emily looked at the man again. He was still watching her, but now his posture was less tense. He didn't move toward her, didn't raise the gun. He seemed patient. Emily felt a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. Relief, because maybe she had found someone who wouldn't harm her. Anxiety, because she still didn't know if she could trust him. She had learned that trust was earned slowly and betrayal was everywhere. Still, she didn't run. Not yet. Not this time. She pressed herself against the ground, hoping he wouldn't notice her trembling. "Don't look at me!" she whispered once more, barely audible. But she also whispered a quiet hope to herself. Maybe I can survive this. Maybe I can find safety. The wind blew gently across the fields, carrying the faint scent of smoke and wood. For the first time in a long time, Emily allowed herself to breathe. The world was still dangerous, and danger was still near. But for the first time in a long time, she felt the tiniest glimmer of possibility. She could survive! She could hide. And maybe, just maybe, she could find someone who would help her, not hurt her. And with that thought, Emily stayed still, watching the man and waiting. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew she had to be ready. Her bare feet ached, her body hurt, and her spirit was fragile. But her will to survive was stronger than it had ever been. She would not give up. Not now! Not ever! Emily stayed crouched behind the bush, her eyes fixed on the man in the yard. The early morning light fell gently over the hills, but she hardly noticed. Her body ached from running and hiding, her feet cut and raw, and her arms covered in bruises. Yet fear kept her sharp. Every muscle was tense, ready to spring into motion if danger came. She didn't know this man, didn't know if he would help her or turn her away. But for now, he was the only person in sight, and she had nowhere else to go. The man, John, lowered his gun slowly. He didn't make any sudden movements, and his eyes softened as he watched Emily. He noticed her torn clothes, her bruised arms, and the dirt covering her face. His first instinct was to step back, unsure if she was a threat or just a frightened girl lost in the woods. He had lived alone on his ranch for years, rarely seeing strangers. Visitors were rare, and most people respected his space. But this was different. John put the gun down carefully, keeping one hand on it just in case. Then he spoke in a calm, gentle voice. "Hey, it's okay! I'm not going to hurt you!" Emily flinched at the sound of his voice. She pressed her head lower, whispering to herself again, "Don't look at me. Don't look at me." The words were a shield, a way to hide her vulnerability. But her body was too tired to run anymore. Her legs shook, her feet burned with pain, and tears threatened to spill over again. John stepped closer, slowly, carefully. "I can see you're hurt. Do you need help?" She shook her head slightly, not trusting him. She had been betrayed before, and the fear of being hurt again ran deeper than any pain in her body. Her voice came out as a small whisper. I don't want trouble." John crouched a few feet away, giving her space. He could see the fear in her eyes, the way she wanted to vanish into the ground. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said softly. "You're safe here, I promise." Emily stayed silent for a long time, watching him. His eyes were calm, steady, not judging her, not demanding anything. It was strange, almost unbelievable. People rarely looked at her like that. They either ignored her, pitied her, or made her feel like a problem. But John, he seemed different. Finally, she nodded slightly, still not meeting his eyes. He took that as a small step. "I can get you inside, get you cleaned up and some food," he said. "You look exhausted." Emily hesitated. She wanted safety, but she also wanted to hide. I can't," she whispered. "They'll find me," John nodded, understanding without judgment. "I can protect you." "But you need to come inside. You can't stay out here. Not like this." She looked at him, seeing the seriousness in his eyes. There was no threat, no anger, only concern. Slowly, carefully, she took a small step forward, her bare feet pressed into the soft dirt, leaving tiny red marks. Every step was painful, but she forced herself to keep moving. She didn't know if she could trust him, but her body refused to keep running. John held his hand out, not touching her, just showing a gesture of peace. "It's okay. Just take it slow. You're safe." Emily nodded, and with another small step, moved closer. The fear in her eyes was still there, but she also felt something new, a tiny spark of hope. She wasn't sure if it would last, but it was there. When she was closer, John led her around the side of the house, carefully avoiding sudden movements. He opened the door to a small, warm kitchen. The smell of coffee and bread filled the room, a stark contrast to the cold, harsh night she had endured. Emily's eyes widened slightly. She had not expected warmth, not in a place like this. She looked down, ashamed of how she appeared. Her clothes were torn, dirt smeared across her skin, and her feet were covered in cuts. She whispered again, "Don't look at me!" John knelt slightly, speaking softly. "I won't look in a way that hurts you. I just want to help." For the first time in a long while, Emily felt the tiniest bit of relief. She allowed herself to enter the house, moving slowly. Every sound seemed louder, the creak of the wooden floor, the hum of the stove. But she kept going, step by step. John followed, patient and silent, making no sudden moves that could startle her. He guided her to a chair and gestured for her to sit. "I'll get you something to eat. Then we can see about cleaning those cuts." Emily nodded but didn't speak. She was too tired, too scared. Her body shivered as she sank into the chair, hugging herself. John left the room briefly and returned with a bowl of warm porridge. He set it in front of her gently. "Eat," he said. "It will help with your strength." She looked at the food, hesitant. Her stomach was empty, but the fear of taking anything from someone else made her pause. Finally, her hunger won over. She picked up the spoon and ate slowly, savoring each warm bite. John watched quietly, giving her space. He didn't force her, didn't pressure her, just waited patiently. After a while, Emily's hands trembled less, and she began to speak softly. I ran away," she whispered. They were trying to hurt me." John nodded slowly, listening. He didn't interrupt, didn't judge. "You did the right thing by coming here," he said gently. "You're safe now." Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away quickly. She was not used to kindness, and it felt strange, almost uncomfortable. I don't want anyone to see me like this," she said, her voice trembling. I'm scared." John placed a hand on the table, a safe distance from her, and said calmly, "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for. I just want to help you heal." Time passed slowly. Emily ate, drank, and finally allowed herself to relax slightly. She could feel her body responding to safety for the first time in a long while. Her bruises still hurt, and her feet were sore, but she no longer felt the same constant panic. John prepared a small basin of warm water and soap, sitting nearby as Emily hesitated. "You can clean yourself if you want," he said softly. "No rush. Just take it slow." Emily nodded, her hands shaking, and began to wash the dirt from her arms and face. She didn't look at John, still afraid of being seen fully. But she allowed herself to breathe, to let the water soothe her skin. Each movement was a small victory over fear, a quiet reclaiming of her body and self. Afterward, John found a blanket and wrapped it gently around her shoulders. "You'll be warm now," he said. "Try to rest. You've been through a lot." Emily sank back into the chair, exhausted. She let the blanket cover her, finally allowing herself to close her eyes for a brief moment. The fear hadn't disappeared completely, but for the first time in a long while she felt safe enough to rest. John stayed nearby, quietly tidying the kitchen, giving her the space she needed. He understood that trust couldn't be forced. It had to be earned slowly. And Emily, though still scared, had taken the first step. She had allowed someone to see her, not fully, not yet, but enough to begin the process of healing. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows, warming the room. Emily felt it on her face, a gentle reminder that the world could still hold kindness, even after all she had endured. She didn't know what the future would bring, but for the first time she allowed herself to imagine a possibility where she could survive, where she could find safety, where she could finally breathe. And as she sat there, wrapped in a blanket, watching John move quietly around the kitchen, Emily realized that maybe she didn't have to whisper, "Don't look at me," forever. Maybe someday she could look up without fear. The morning light filled the ranch house with a soft warmth, but Emily still sat quietly, wrapped in the blanket John had given her. Her body ached, her bruises throbbed, and her feet still hurt from the long night of running. Yet she felt a small, unfamiliar sense of safety. For the first time in many hours, or maybe even days, she wasn't looking over her shoulder. She could sit in one place without the immediate fear of being found or hurt. John moved about the kitchen quietly, making small repairs here and there, feeding the chickens outside and tending to the chores that came with living on a ranch. He didn't hover or demand conversation. He had learned long ago that patience was often more powerful than words. Emily watched him from the chair, careful not to meet his eyes fully. It wasn't that she didn't trust him. It was that trust was still a fragile, delicate thing, like a bird with broken wings. "You don't have to say anything yet," John said softly, noticing her gaze. "Just rest." "I'll be right here if you need me." Emily nodded slightly, keeping her eyes on her lap. Her throat felt tight, as if words might get stuck halfway. She had never been able to tell her story easily. Speaking about her fear, her bruises, the night she had spent running, each memory was sharp, painful, and difficult to face. She had learned to bury her experiences deep inside, hiding them even from herself at times. Yet being here, in this quiet place with someone who didn't demand answers, made the pain slightly more bearable. Time passed slowly. Emily sipped a little warm water, the heat soothing her throat, and gradually the tension in her shoulders began to ease. John occasionally spoke in low tones, telling her about the ranch, the animals, or small stories of things he had seen over the years. Nothing demanded a response from her. Nothing forced her to speak before she was ready. And slowly, very slowly, She began to listen, letting the normal sounds of life around her settle into her mind. After a while, John came back with a small basin of warm water and a clean cloth. "You can wash up a little if you want," he said. "It might make you feel better." Emily hesitated, feeling shy and embarrassed about her appearance. Her bruises, cuts, and dirt-covered skin made her feel exposed. She whispered almost inaudibly, I don't want anyone to see me like this." John nodded, understanding completely. "You don't have to show me anything you're not ready to. I just want you to be comfortable. You're safe here." Emily slowly lifted her hands and began washing her face, carefully removing dirt and dried sweat. The warm water felt soothing, easing some of the tension in her muscles. She avoided looking at John directly, but she felt the gentle calmness of his presence nearby. Each movement was a small act of courage, a quiet reclaiming of her body from fear. When she finished, John offered her clean clothes. They were simple, old jeans and a soft shirt, but they were warm and comforting. Emily changed slowly, careful not to rush. The new clothes felt strange against her skin, but they also gave her a tiny sense of normalcy she hadn't felt in a long time. She didn't look at herself in the mirror, still afraid of fully facing the bruises and cuts that reminded her of what she had endured. After breakfast, John suggested they go outside. Emily hesitated, unsure if she was ready to leave the safety of the house. "It's just outside," he said gently. "Fresh air might help. You can stay near the porch if you want." She slowly agreed, walking barefoot across the wooden floor and stepping out into the sunlight. The warmth of the morning sun touched her skin, and she realized how long it had been since she had felt it without fear. The field stretched out before her, green and open, the trees swaying gently in the breeze. The sound of birds chirping and the distant lowing of cows created a calm background that contrasted sharply with the chaos of her past days. Emily sat on the porch, her feet dangling slightly above the ground. She watched John move about the yard, feeding chickens and collecting eggs. There was a rhythm to his work, a quiet confidence that came from years of living close to the land. It was strange, comforting, and peaceful. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emily allowed herself to simply observe, without thinking about danger or escape. John noticed her watching him and smiled softly. "You don't have to do anything right now," he said. "Just take your time. There's no rush." Emily nodded, feeling a small warmth in her chest. She didn't speak, but the gesture meant she was listening, that she was starting to feel a tiny bit of connection. Trust was growing, slowly, like the first shoots of spring after a long winter. As the day passed, Emily began to help in small ways. She carried a basket of eggs to the kitchen, careful not to drop any. She helped sweep the porch and water a few plants. Each task was simple, but it gave her a sense of purpose, a feeling that she could contribute, that she wasn't completely helpless. John guided her gently, never pushing too hard, never judging her movements. He offered encouragement quietly, a word here or a nod there. By afternoon, Emily was starting to feel a little more relaxed. She even allowed herself to laugh softly at one of John's stories about a mischievous goat that had gotten stuck in the barn. The sound felt strange in her ears, foreign but comforting. She realized how long it had been since she had laughed freely without fear lurking just behind it. John noticed the change and didn't comment immediately. He knew trust couldn't be rushed. Instead, he continued with his work, letting Emily settle into a small sense of normalcy. Over time, she began to speak in short sentences, telling him small pieces of her story. The long nights she had spent running, the fear that never seemed to leave, and the loneliness that had followed her like a shadow. She didn't reveal everything, only what she felt safe sharing. John listened quietly, never interrupting, never judging. He offered comfort where he could, sometimes with a reassuring nod or a gentle word. His calm presence created a safe space, a rare feeling Emily had almost forgotten existed. She began to feel that maybe, just maybe, someone could see her without fear, without pity, and without judgment. As evening approached, John suggested they prepare a simple meal together. Emily hesitated at first, but agreed. Cooking side by side, they worked in silence for a while. the rhythm of chopping vegetables and stirring a pot providing a comforting background to their thoughts. Emily felt a strange sense of normalcy in the task, a small taste of a life she had almost forgotten existed. When the meal was ready, they ate quietly at the kitchen table. Emily noticed how safe she felt sitting across from John, how different it was to be in a room where nobody wanted to hurt her. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to feel calm, even a little happy. The fear was still there, lurking in the corners of her mind, but it no longer dominated her completely. After dinner, John brought out a small stack of blankets and suggested Emily rest. "You've had a long day," he said softly. "You need to let your body recover." Emily nodded, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over her. She curled up under the blankets, allowing herself to sink into a rare feeling of safety. John stayed nearby, quietly tidying up, never pressuring her to speak or move. She realized how much she appreciated his patience, how much it mattered that he gave her the space to heal at her own pace. That night, as Emily lay in bed, she thought about the day. She had begun to trust John, just a little, and that trust felt like a fragile flower growing after a harsh winter. She knew it would take time for her to fully feel safe, but the small steps she had taken today were victories. She had spoken a few words, moved about the house, eaten, laughed softly, and even helped with small tasks. Each act, however small, was a reclaiming of her strength and her life. Emily drifted into a restless sleep, her mind full of thoughts and fears, but also hope. She dreamed of open fields, gentle sunlight, and a world where she could live without constant fear. And though the road ahead would be long and uncertain, she knew that she had found a place where trust could grow, where someone cared without judgment, and where she could begin to heal. And for the first time in a long while, Emily allowed herself to feel that maybe she wasn't completely alone. The next morning began quietly on the ranch. The sun rose slowly, casting golden light across the fields, and for a moment, Emily felt a rare sense of peace. She was beginning to get used to the small routines of life at the ranch, the smell of fresh hay, the sound of chickens clucking, the soft lowing of cows. It was almost normal, almost safe. But deep in the back of her mind, she couldn't shake the feeling that danger was never far away. John moved about the yard, repairing a fence that had been damaged in a recent storm. Emily helped in small ways, holding tools and passing him nails and hammers when he needed them. Each simple act made her feel useful and strong in a way she hadn't felt in months. She still kept her head down at times, and she still avoided looking at him fully. But slowly, cautiously, she was learning to trust that she might be safe here. Then it happened. A distant shout echoed across the fields, sharp and sudden, making Emily freeze. Her heart leapt into her throat. She turned toward the sound, but all she could see was the edge of the forest, swaying gently in the wind. The calm morning seemed to shatter in an instant. Her mind raced. Whoever had been chasing her hadn't given up. They had found her. John stiffened as he heard the noise. He set down the hammer and moved closer to Emily, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's okay," he said calmly, though his eyes were sharp and alert. "Stay here! Don't move!" Emily's hands trembled. She wanted to run, to hide, but there was nowhere to go. She had nowhere left to run. Her feet hurt, her body was weak, and she knew that running might only make things worse. She looked at John, and for the first time she realized that maybe, just maybe, she could rely on him to protect her. The shouting grew closer, and Emily could make out the sound of heavy boots crunching against dirt. Someone was approaching the ranch. Panic surged through her, but John remained calm. He motioned for her to stay behind the porch, to stay low. "I've got this," he said quietly. "Trust me." Emily did as he asked, pressing herself against the wooden beams of the porch. Her body shook, not from cold, but from fear and adrenaline. She watched as John moved forward, a steady figure in the golden morning light. In his hand he carried a rifle, but his stance was cautious, careful. He didn't raise it immediately. He knew the goal wasn't to hurt anyone, but to protect Emily and defuse the situation if possible. The intruder appeared at the edge of the yard, a tall figure with a rough look and an angry expression.
He stopped when he saw John, raising his own weapon slightly, but John didn't move aggressively.
Instead, he spoke firmly, his voice calm and commanding. "You don't need to do this! Step back and leave! There's no reason for anyone to get hurt!" Emily's heart raced as she watched the confrontation unfold. Her fear was raw and sharp, but beneath it, she felt a strange sense of pride. John wasn't just protecting her physically. He was showing her another kind of strength, the strength to stand firm, to speak with reason, to protect without causing harm unnecessarily. The intruder hesitated, his eyes narrowing as he considered John's words. Emily could see the tension in his stance, the conflict between anger and caution. Her own fear mixed with hope. Maybe John could handle this! Maybe they could get through it without anyone being hurt. John slowly lowered his rifle, showing that he wasn't looking for a fight. "I'm not your enemy," he said firmly. "I'm just protecting someone who has done nothing to you. Leave her alone. You don't need to come here." The intruder spat to the ground, frustration clear in his movements. "She's mine," he growled, stepping forward. "She can't just walk away from me." Emily's stomach sank, but John didn't flinch. He took a careful step forward, speaking steadily. "No one owns anyone. She has a right to be safe, to be free. You need to leave, now." The tension was almost unbearable. Emily could barely breathe, but she clung to the sight of John standing firm. She realized that his courage wasn't just about holding a weapon. It was about standing up for what was right, protecting someone who couldn't protect herself and refusing to be intimidated. The intruder's anger flared, but John didn't back down. He continued to speak calmly, appealing to reason rather than force. "You don't want this to get worse," he said. "There's no reason for anyone to get hurt today. Step away, and no one has to face any harm." Emily watched, her heart pounding, as the intruder finally hesitated. The words, combined with John's calm presence, seemed to have an effect. He lowered his weapon slightly, though his expression was still angry and tense. Emily realized something important in that moment. Courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about standing firm even when fear was present. John's bravery gave her a new kind of strength, a sense that maybe, just maybe, she could face danger without giving in to it. The intruder finally stepped back, his hands shaking slightly. He looked around, realizing that John would not be intimidated and that Emily was not an easy target. Slowly, carefully, he turned and retreated, disappearing back into the edge of the forest. Emily felt the tension drain from her body, but her legs still trembled. She had been frozen in place, unable to move or speak, but now she could breathe again. She looked at John, her eyes wide. You stopped him!" she whispered. John nodded, lowering his rifle completely now. "He's gone. You're safe." Emily felt tears prick her eyes, not just from relief, but from a deep sense of gratitude and respect. She had witnessed courage, patience, and strength in action, and it gave her hope that she, too, could reclaim some of her own power. John turned to her, his expression softening. "Come on inside. You need to rest." Emily nodded and followed him back into the house. She moved slowly, still shaken, but feeling a little braver. She realized that danger could appear at any time, but courage and protection could appear too. She had learned that sometimes survival meant relying on someone else, and sometimes it meant standing firm yourself. Inside, John offered her a seat and prepared some tea. The warmth of the cup in her hands was grounding, helping her shake off the last remnants of fear. She sipped slowly, letting the calm of the house sink in. The quiet was almost comforting now, a stark contrast to the chaos of the morning. For the first time, Emily allowed herself to feel a sense of safety that wasn't fleeting. The threat had come, and it had been real, but she had survived. John had protected her, and she had learned that she could trust him to stand beside her. It was a lesson she had needed desperately, one that would shape her understanding of strength and courage. The rest of the day passed slowly. Emily moved about the house, helping with chores when she could, but mostly just resting and observing. She felt a quiet sense of belonging, even though she had only been there a short time. John's calm presence, steady guidance, and respect for her space created a feeling of home that she hadn't felt in years. As evening approached, Emily sat on the porch again, her feet dangling above the ground. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. She thought about the morning, the confrontation, and the courage she had witnessed. Fear still lingered, but it no longer controlled her. She had survived. She had a protector. And she had a glimpse of the possibility that life could be different. John joined her on the porch quietly, carrying a small lantern. They didn't speak immediately. Instead, they watched the sunset together, the silence comfortable and reassuring. Emily realized that trust was growing, not forced, but earned through patience, action, and care. She had learned that she could rely on someone else without losing herself. That night, Emily slept more soundly than she had in months. The morning's danger had reminded her how fragile safety could be, but it had also shown her the power of courage, calm, and protection. She dreamed not of running and hiding, but of open fields, warm sunlight, and the possibility of living without constant fear. And though the road ahead would still be uncertain, Emily now knew that she wasn't completely alone. The next morning, the ranch was calm. The sun rose slowly, casting a warm golden light over the fields. Birds chirped cheerfully in the trees, and the soft breeze carried the smell of fresh grass. Emily woke up feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time: safety. For the first time in months, maybe even years, she didn't wake up with a pounding heart or a sense of dread. She took a deep breath, letting the fresh air fill her lungs, and for a moment she simply listened to the peaceful sounds of the ranch. John was already outside, tending to the animals. He moved with ease and confidence, feeding chickens, watering the plants, and checking the fences. Emily watched him from the porch, noticing the quiet strength in his movements. He was calm, steady, and patient, the kind of person who faced problems without rushing, who thought carefully before acting. She realized that his presence alone gave her a sense of security she hadn't known she could feel. Slowly, Emily got out of bed and dressed in the clean clothes John had given her. Her feet were still sore, but she felt a quiet determination rising within her. Today, she decided, she would try to do more than just survive. She would begin to heal, to reclaim a life that had been stolen from her by fear and violence. She stepped outside, and John noticed her immediately. "Good morning," he said with a small smile. "Did you sleep well?" Emily nodded, her lips curling into a tiny smile. "Better than I have in a long time," she admitted. John's expression softened. "That's good. Today we can do a few small chores together. Nothing too difficult. Just things that will help you feel a little stronger." Emily agreed, and they began moving through the ranch together. She carried a basket of eggs, careful not to drop them. She watered the plants with John, her hands steady as she poured the water onto the soil. Every small task made her feel more capable, more independent, and more like herself. She realized that healing wasn't just about resting, it was about taking small steps to regain control over her body and her life. After the chores, John suggested a walk through the fields. Emily hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. She needed to face the wide-open spaces, the sunlight on her skin, and the fresh air without fear. Together they walked slowly through the tall grass, Emily's bare feet brushing against the soft blades. She could feel the earth beneath her, solid and real, and for the first time in a long while she felt grounded. As they walked, John spoke softly about the ranch, the animals, and the land. He told stories of the goats, cows, and chickens, and Emily listened, laughing quietly at the funny moments. She realized that she hadn't laughed like this in a long time, not a full, carefree laugh. The sound of it surprised her, but it felt good, like a small piece of freedom returning to her. They stopped by a small creek that ran through the property. The water sparkled in the sunlight, and Emily knelt down, dipping her hands into the cool, flowing water. She let it run over her fingers, feeling the freshness and clarity of it. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her voice soft but full of wonder. John nodded. "It is. And it's yours to enjoy. No one can take that away from you." Emily looked at him, truly meeting his eyes for the first time. There was no judgment, no pity, only kindness and understanding. She felt a warmth in her chest, a sense of connection that she had thought impossible. Slowly, she began to feel that she could trust him completely, not just to protect her, but to support her as she healed. They spent the day moving about the ranch, completing small tasks, feeding animals, and exploring the fields. Emily felt her strength returning, both physically and emotionally. The bruises on her body still hurt, but the fear in her mind was fading. Each step, each small accomplishment reminded her that she was not helpless, that she could survive, and that she could rebuild her life. By evening, they returned to the house. John suggested they sit on the porch and watch the sunset together. Emily agreed, feeling a deep sense of peace. The sky was painted with shades of orange, pink, and purple, and the field stretched endlessly into the distance. She felt a quiet gratitude for this moment, for the safety, and for the man who had given her a chance to breathe again. John spoke softly, his voice calm and gentle. "You've come a long way in just a few days," he said. "I know it's not easy, and there's still more healing ahead, but you're stronger than you realize." Emily nodded, her eyes glistening. "I feel different," she admitted. "Not completely safe yet, but like maybe I can be. Like maybe I can finally live without constant fear." John smiled. "You can. It will take time, but you will. And you won't have to do it alone." For the first time in a long while, Emily allowed herself to imagine a future. She pictured herself walking through the fields freely, tending to animals, enjoying simple moments of peace and beauty. She imagined feeling the sun on her skin without fear, laughing without guilt or worry, and trusting someone again. These thoughts were new and fragile, but they were there. And for the first time, she allowed herself to hope. That night, as Emily prepared for bed, she reflected on everything that had happened. She had run, hidden, and feared for her life. She had been bruised, barefoot, and alone, but she had also found courage, trust, and protection. She had experienced kindness and patience in a world that had often been cruel. And most importantly, she had begun to reclaim her life. She lay in bed, feeling the warmth of the blankets and the quiet comfort of the house. John was nearby, tending to chores quietly, giving her space to rest. Emily closed her eyes and allowed herself to drift into sleep, a deep, peaceful sleep filled with dreams of open fields, sunlight, and freedom. When she woke the next morning, she felt a sense of strength she hadn't known before. Her feet were still sore, her bruises still hurt, but she was ready to face the day. She stepped outside barefoot, letting the soft grass touch her skin. She lifted her head and looked around, truly seeing the world without fear. For the first time, she walked without whispering. "Don't look at me!" John noticed and smiled gently. "You're ready," he said quietly. "Ready to take the next step." Emily nodded, feeling a new determination rising within her. She knew the road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, memories, and fears to face. But she also knew she was not alone. She had strength, courage, and someone who would stand beside her. She had hope, and hope was more powerful than fear. Together, they walked through the fields, Emily feeling the sun on her face, the breeze in her hair, and the solid ground beneath her feet. She knew that life would never be perfect, but it could be beautiful again. She had survived. She had healed. And she had begun to live. And as the sun set over the ranch, casting long shadows across the fields, Emily smiled softly to herself. She had found safety, trust, and freedom. The past could not be changed, but the future was hers to shape. She would move forward, step by step, with courage in her heart and hope guiding her way. The ranch was quiet, the animals settled for the night, and the stars began to twinkle in the sky. Emily lay down under the soft blankets, feeling the warmth and peace that had been absent for so long. She knew that she was finally free, free to be herself, free to heal, and free to live. And in that quiet golden moment, Emily whispered softly, not out of fear, but with gratitude and courage, "I am safe. I am alive. I can live."